Gary Parrish here with Nebraska head coach Fred Hoiberg, heading into year 7. I know last season didn't go exactly the way you wanted. You had some injuries, but you did close with 4 straight wins, and you won the college basketball crown and had your team finish in the top 50 at KenPom. Can you draw anything from that to carry over to this season?
Yeah, it was a very strange season,
Yeah.
Gary. First of all, getting the news that we weren't going to have Ring Mast, who was as important as anybody on our team the year before when we played in the NCAA tournament. He led us in rebounding, assists, and he was second in our team in scoring. So obviously when you have a front court player that does so much for your team, that's a hard thing to replace. We got off to a really good start, had a tough stretch in the middle of that, and then had a really good winning streak. And, a big part of that, we beat Ohio State at home. I think it was our 5th win in a row. And Berke Buchtengel, unfortunately, went down with a pretty nasty ankle injury, and he just never regained his form because he never got fully healthy again. And then we lost 5 in a row to finish. Disappointing, but then we regrouped and found a way to go out and cut down the nets in that tournament in Vegas. And it did give us some momentum. We were able to add some really good players. We actually had 4, the way the portal works now, during the tournament while we were still playing. We got 4 commitments in that time, which is very weird. But anyway, it was a good finish. I really like the group that we put together for this year.
So I was talking to Tom Izzo earlier, and he was not complaining, but lamenting perhaps about just sort of the state of recruiting and how you're now asked to do things that you were never asked to do before. In fact, in some ways, you're required to do things that you were quite literally told not to do before. And he just sort of said, hey, listen, I've reached the point, I think, where I'm just not going to complain about it. I'm just going to focus on my team and try to run my program the way I can run it as best I can and worry about that and nothing more. But it is weird to be trying to focus on your current players, but then the transfer portal's open, and if you're not working on that, it's going to impact your future. It is a weird time to be a college basketball coach.
It's a very weird time. And, the really hard part about it is there's just so many unanswered questions for our future. And, is there going to be a 5th year? And, that affects the way that you might recruit,
yes.
As far as how many guys you're going to bring in. We're just operating under the assumption that it's not going to happen until we hear otherwise, because one week you hear it's going to happen, the next week you say it's 100% not, and it's almost whatever direction the wind's blowing, it is what you hear about the rule. So, until you get clarity, we're just going to operate under the current rule.
And, we had just done this Candid Coaches series at CBSSports.com where we asked more than 100 coaches a variety of questions, and my main takeaway from the experience was just like there's a lot of confusion out there. Do we have a 5th year or not? Can I get an NIL deal through or not? I had one coach after another say, GP, I don't even know how much money I have to spend on my roster, what's allowed, what isn't. It's confusing.
It is. It's very confusing. And, we know what we're going to get from a revenue share standpoint. Right. That we know. But then to your point, Gary, on, what's going to get through the clearinghouse, what's not. So it's hard to promise right now to anybody or talk to a kid about what they're going to get because we just don't know.
Yeah, I had one coach tell me, I'm trying to be honest with student athletes, prospective student athletes, and tell them I don't know, but I know not everybody is saying I don't know, and so what do you do?
Yeah, and that's the hard part. That's always something we've tried to do is be honest and be upfront, and that's all I know how to do. So, I hope that doesn't get us lost, and, again, it's in fairness to these kids, we owe it to them to be upfront and honest to them. You can't lie and then they get there and say you'll figure it out. That's one thing I really don't like about our business.
There's obviously roster turnover all over the country, at your place included, but like you mentioned, you get Rink back, you bring Connor back, and then Jamarcus Lawrence is also back in your program for a second time, which is an unusual thing. How does that work? He starts with you, transfers out, now he's back in Lincoln.
Yeah, when Jamarcus went into the portal, we called right away because we really missed Jamarcus a year ago. And, he does so many things. He guards the ball. He can play both guard spots. He's got great pace to his game. And I think as important as anything, he knows what we're all about. He knows, the standards that we're trying to live up to. He knows the core values that we have in our program. And, getting a guy like that back in was very important. It was one of our biggest off-season wins was getting Jamarcus back in a Husker uniform. But then he also, from a retention standpoint, we were second in the league as far as retention rate. And you bring back Sam, and you bring back Cale Jacobson, you bring back Braden Frager, who redshirted for us a year ago. I think he's going to be a terrific player when it's all said and done. So I'm excited about this roster.
Rink is now back. you mentioned all the things he did 2 years ago. Just a devastating injury. How healthy is he now? What's he look like in preseason workouts?
Yeah, I mean, he's, is he back to full form? I don't know yet. It takes so long when you go through. I mean, it was a full 12 months before he was able even to pick up a basketball, and it takes a long time. I mean, I had a couple really tough, I had an open heart surgery at the end, and I remember trying to get back in shape after that to see if I was going to resume my NBA career, and it takes a long time, after you go through a very invasive surgery like Rink went through to get your timing back, to get your wind back, to get your pop and athleticism. And he worked his tail off to get himself back to this point where he followed the rehab to a T, which you have to do or else you're going to put your career in jeopardy. So, is he back to 100%? Asking him, probably not. But he's getting close, and he's out there right now with no restrictions.
One of the neat things about your career is at Iowa State, you prioritized the transfer portal, for lack of a better term at the time, before almost anybody else. I think you and Eric Musselman were really out there like, this is a way to win. Even if I have to sit out a player for a year, this is a way to get experienced talent. What did you recognize back then that maybe it took another decade for the rest of the coaches to understand?
Well, I think the biggest thing for us at Iowa State was it was our only chance of getting top talent into our program.
Right.
And, we weren't getting top 100 kids at that time. So, it was a pretty massive rebuild. We had a couple players that were left over. Melvin Edgem was a huge one that had committed Greg McDermott. We were very fortunate to keep. Part of that was T.J. Altenberger, who recruited him. But, yeah, we built that first team. We had Royce White, who ended up sitting out, Chris Babb, Chris Allen, and Anthony Booker. So you had 4 high-level players. And I knew that first year we basically had 6 guys that were going to be on the court. This isn't the old days, Gary, where you actually had to sit out as a transfer. But what I saw to that scout team that year is we had a chance to turn this thing around quickly.
Right.
And we did. And then once we started winning, now we're attracting the George Niang and Monte Morris and Matt Thomas and Naz Long, freshmen that had a big impact on our program and really became the backbone. So, yes, we started it with transfers, but those 4-year guys were really the ones that took us to the next level.
So throughout the day, every year at Big Ten Media Day, somebody's going to bring up the fact that a Big Ten school has not won the national championship since Michigan State did it in 2000. I talked to Matt Painter about it. I talked to Tom Izzo about it. They both feel a responsibility on some level to try to fix that. You've got your own little bullet point connected to your program. That Nebraska has never won a game in the NCAA tournament. You had your team in the field a couple of years ago. You were in my hometown of Memphis. The fans were incredible. Like my friends who run FedEx Forum are very appreciative of the way the Nebraska fans, gathered in that place. Yeah. How important is it for you to undo that someday before you retire? You would like to bring a NCAA tournament win to this school.
Yeah, it's very important, and for the reason that you just mentioned, for the fans. And, when you look at Nebraska sports, there's not a better fan base as far as supporting the program than Nebraska. And you see it in football, opposing stadiums. I remember Colorado, the year I got here, was 70% red in a really good stadium with a great home court or home field environment, and Nebraska just invaded the place. And, that's how it is. You look at the volleyball team, #1 in the nation. You look at every arena they play in, it's half red. That's how it was in the tournament. I remember I walked out and Buzz Williams came up to me and said, y'all really travel like this? And it was a very pro Nebraska. Even the Crown last year. I mean, without Nebraska, there's not many people in the building. So, yes, to answer your question, 100%. Want to bring that first win. A couple things. I think if Rink would have been on that team last year, might have been the year, but it didn't happen. So, all we can focus on is right now. We can't worry about anything that's happened in the past. And, again, I really like our group this season.
Last thing before I get you out of here, your team is showing up in, top 40 rankings, top 50 rankings. That puts you in the range where people think you're going to be an NCAA tournament team. Is this team, on paper, when healthy, good enough to get that first NCAA tournament victory?
Yeah, I think we are because we shoot it. And, that's one thing when I look at all the different teams that I've had. We got a front court player that can facilitate and Rink. You look at Royce White, you look at George Niang, you look at Rink a couple years ago. Getting him back on the floor with shooters around him, is a pretty good recipe. You can beat anybody. You can also lose to anybody if the ball's not going in the basket. But I really like the makeup of our team. And we're top 50 in a lot of polls. That puts us sometimes 13th or 14th in the Big Ten with the depth and talent in our conference. But listen. One thing I think that will give us a chance every night is we compete, and we play hard, and we got a great group of kids. And at the end of the day, I know that's what our fan base appreciates.
Fred, it's always good to see you. I appreciate your time.
Yeah, you too, Gary. Thank you.
Thanks.